Most people today are living, in this fast life lane, but you have to take time to quiet the noise. And when you do, you have to listen to that voice inside of you. And if it's speaking something totally to your heart, then you will act on it.
Welcome to the Zami Nobla National Organization of Black Lesbians on Aging podcast. We are your sound source for Black lesbian herstory. I'm your host, Angela Denise Davis.
My name is Phyllis Robinson, better known as Phil, the artist, barber, and free spirit. I flow through the world being very passionate, on purpose, and I love being around people.
We love that you are around us here at the Zami Nobla podcast. Tell me a little bit about where you grew up and what was life like for you as a kid.
Basically, I'm from everywhere. Let's start with I was born on a naval base in Portsmouth, Virginia, and from there I ventured to Bethesda, Maryland, where my family and we lived in D.C. So my parents got divorced. We were in California, and we ended up on grandma's couch in Nashville, Tennessee. So actually, I was raised in Nashville, Tennessee.
How did you get from Nashville to Atlanta?
Well, I've always ventured to Atlanta, especially when I was a little girl. My grandmother used to bring us down to Atlanta to go to Six Flags, visit Dr. King's church, and Pascal's restaurant, the old one, the original one, on Auburn Avenue. So I was always fascinated with Atlanta because I always saw these black people. And in my hometown, mainly, was white people. So it was just like, I just dreamed about coming to Atlanta. And I landed here because it was the outlet for women of color who were trying to find their way with their sexuality.
Many people talk about coming to Atlanta for that very reason. Particularly around the 70s and the 80s, a lot of folks came here, black queer folks, because of Atlanta being known as a gay mecca. So
right,
you were in good company.
See, I'm from Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee, which is known as the Bible Belt. So it was like 1 foot in the closet and 1 foot out. And so, once I had graduated from college, I pretty much kind of ventured down here to get a great job at the Journal and live my lifestyle.
I am aware of what Nashville's like. I spent 10 years there, so I clearly understand how it was, for me, a place where it was very difficult to find other black lesbians.
Exactly.
And so for women who wanted to find community, it was very rough because unless you knew someone who had house parties or who invited people in for brunches or something, you were out of that loop.
Right.
And I did not know those pockets of community. So I clearly understand that. And I'm talking about being in Nashville in the 90s and early 2000s.
It's very conservative, very conservative.
I clearly understand what life in Nashville is like for my sisters. And I hear that some people still have those type of experiences in Nashville. It's kind of rough in that regard.
Right.
So you talked about coming to Atlanta and working for the
Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
Okay, what did you do there?
Actually, I was a graphic artist. I laid out the newspaper in the composing room. And this was back then when you didn't have the computer that did all the work. So I worked along with the reporters, the marketing team, photographers. It was really fast-paced and fun.
Is that one way you got into visual arts, or were you into arts before then?
I was into visual arts before then. Actually, being a visual artist, I've always been that ever since I was like 3 years old. If my mother was living today, she would tell you I would be in the corner doodling.
Wow.
So it's always been in the fibers of my soul to be a visual artist. So as far as graphic arts are concerned, I knew that I had to pay bills, so I couldn't just sell painting, so I had to do other things. So I was blessed enough to get a job at the Journal.
What did you major in college?
My major was art and art education. Actually, I had moved to Atlanta really to become a teacher, but I just ventured into other things.
The first time I met you, and you may not remember this, you were working at a shop, and I was coming to the shop, and you were like, hey, I guess you saw this blind lady, but you didn't say blind lady. You said, hey, did you help crossing the street?
I did?
Yes, you did. Remember. And see, it was a long time ago. It's probably at least four or 5 years ago. And so I was like, oh, she's so nice. Look at that woman helping me cross the street. Then I knew that you were a barber in that shop, and I love having women barbers.
Actually, I was the only woman in a predominant male environment. I was the first face you saw.
Yes.
You came into the shop.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's something interesting to talk about as well, because being a woman and going into a barbershop can be quite anxiety ridden.
Yes.
Particularly if you are a lesbian and, you're walking into a space that sometimes not even just misogynistic, but heterosexist. And, you never know what the conversation is going to be like. And so it's like, okay, let me just get my hair done. Let me get in and get out. I'm always interested in talking to women who are working in the arena of hair and barber cuts. What has your experience been like, and how did you get into becoming a barber?
Okay. My last corporate job was working at the Gaslight Company. And I'm a part of the generation that got caught up in the downsizing, gotta let you go era. Mm-hmm. So I was with the Gaslight Company for almost 7 years, working in the engineering department. Had no idea what engineering was about, but I got the job based on my drawing skills. So that 7th year, my time came. Okay. I was just so outdone because I loved my job, but needless to say, I was the only woman of color in a department of 70 people. I was packed up, ready to go back to Nashville. Mm-hmm. But thank God for my sister. She was like, you need to find something else to do because I'm so sick and tired of you talking about the corporate did this and the da-da-da-da-da. So she said, you know what? You always love those clippers. Why don't you cut hair? And that, a bell went off in my head. So I started out cutting afros. Mm-hmm. My mom and stepfather's afros. So that's how I got into it. And I found a school in Atlanta, and I was still, kind of working corporate in the meantime, but I was also going to barbering school part-time. So I had to sacrifice. So my first experience in working in a barbershop was downtown, the Underground, where I was in barbering school, but I was thrown into managing a shop of 16 barbers. So that was my first real, I guess you could say, boot camp experience, managing, 16 personalities plus the public and my own. And the majority of it was male.
So you've been cutting hair for over 17 years or so.
Mm-hmm. And I made it a full-time business in 2010.
What has that experience been like for you as you think about just being a woman in the world of barbershops and knowing that has predominantly been the domain of men?
If you really want me to be honest about it, I think God placed me in a male environment to kind of see what the male species was about, because I just really didn't get into them. And in 2014, there were about 12 female barbers, and we were honored across, as being in the first generation of female barbers, all different races, all different backgrounds.
Was that here in Atlanta?
Yes,
oh, wow.
Downtown Atlanta.
Wow.
And I was blown away because, we just thought we were showing up just to showcase our skills. But people from the Bronner Brothers industry and people from all over the world came to support us. It blew my mind because I just didn't think, we were out there like that. We were breaking down barriers and everything because it is competitive.
And I know, as someone who has worn a natural for the past 30 years, every time I'm out and about, and if I meet a sister who looks at my hair, one of the first things she'll say is, "I like your cut. Who cuts your hair?"
Right.
Because I think women want to find someone who can give them the look they like.
Right.
And hopefully they can be led to a place where it's a shop that is very comfortable and it's not hostile. Because I've literally been in shops where I said to myself, you probably may want to either not come back here again or you want to get up and leave. And that's just not here. I was in San Francisco last year, and it was really hard trying to find a good barber in a shop where I felt like, okay, this is great. I finally found it at the end right before I left. But I think it speaks to women wanting to find someone who can cut their hair and who can also provide a comfortable space.
Right. And female barbers are detailers.
Okay, speak more about that.
Detailers meaning that we already have an idea in our mindset of the cut you want. And we take our time, and most of us, the female barbers I know, we consult with the clients because it's important for us to give you your best look. And we also have a soft touch for doing women's hair. We don't want to give you the boy cuts, whatnot, but we do want you to look really nice. So that's the extreme difference. And we don't talk all over your head. And for me in particular, when I'm grooming a client's head, I pretty much kind of pray because I'm dealing with your dome. And it's like a spiritual connection to me. Because I want you to leave out of the shop with a smile on your face.
Well, I know there's going to be many sisters who are going to want your contact information after they finish listening to this podcast, because many women are looking for that.
Okay.
And looking for someone who has that sort of sensitivity and can pay attention to detail.
Right.
So it's really wonderful for you to say how you are, you get spiritually tuned in before you begin that process. What are some of the things you've learned about life through being a barber?
I connect with my clients. They're like family. I guess you could say I'm like their therapist. They tell me everything.
Yes.
It's a safe space. They share stories they wouldn't share with their mates, or they ask for advice with about their children or parents. It's really a close connection. I have a huge clientele of college students of all different nationalities at Georgia Tech. And I've pretty much been like the nurturing part of their lives and, going through the whole college experience. And so I've had the opportunity to cut their hair when they're like freshmen, and now they're seniors and they're in the corporate world now.
Wow. So, that's a pretty wonderful relationship to have.
When I say I've cut every nationality you could think of and the in-between all over the world. I've had the opportunity to showcase my skills and teach barbering 101 in St. Thomas in 2014. I was a part of an international fashion show, and I had the stage and had the models, and I was teaching women who were in cosmetology school how to teach barbering. How to do barbering, and it was quite interesting.
Well, that segues into another space that you occupy as a fashion designer.
Right. After I had finished college, I had I actually did go back to school to become a fashion designer. And at one point, I wanted to model. I still want to model. I would like to model unisex clothing, but I also like to come up with eclectic designs for T-shirts, sneakers, hats. You know, it's like pop art. Every type of art is in my bloodline.
Mm-hmm. Have you had a chance to do any of that, or to combine all of those things together? All of your artistic veins?
Yes. A couple of years ago, I had my first solo show at the West End Performing Arts Center, and I organized it and produced it, and I showcased all my skills, which included being a visual artist. I painted 2 live paintings on stage, and then later on in the event, I did a haircut on stage, and celebrating Black History Month, in which I cut a high top like Kid and Play. And so I had the guy wrapped in a black cape, but when the finale came, I popped the cape and he had like a dashiki on. So
nice.
You know, I like to just, you know, make it more than just a painting. I like the art to entertain people, tell the story.
So you are a woman of many gifts, and there may be some sisters who are at the place you were in the corporate sphere who have a vision for doing something else, and they may be afraid of stepping out. What would you recommend to other sisters who want to make that same sort of leap into a new career?
Let me tell you, I used to sit in that cubicle looking at that clock. And I would say to myself, there has to be something else out here for me to do. Okay. So on my lunch break, again, like I said, I'm multitask. I have a short attention span, so I always have to be kind of doing something. So I would be making calls to get in art shows, or I didn't live too far from my job. I go home and work on a painting lunchtime. So I was already in another space spiritually and mentally until I got laid off. So I consider I was raptured up out of that corporate space. You know, I took the negative and turned it into a positive, into what I was destined to do, be an artist. Most people today are like living, you know, in this fast life lane, but you have to take time for yourself and go into meditation and quiet the noise. And when you do, you have to listen to that voice inside of you, which is, you know, your spiritual side. And if it's speaking something totally to your heart, then you will act on it.
Action. You're also an activist.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
Being that I was raised in Nashville, I came through a time span where I went to an all-black school up to the 6th grade. And the 7th grade, we were bused way out. And so it was, you know, really a horrible time in Nashville. And so seems like I've always been the only one, the only person of color. And through my heart and eyes, I just didn't see any difference in people until I got on one side, the black side, and I would hear this, and then on white side, and I would hear that. All of that stuff used to irritate me. And because with me, I wanted people to fuse together as one and for love and to be kind to people. But that wasn't the real deal. I can remember being walked to the bus by the police and the teachers. My junior high class, the art department was bombed. The music department was bombed. The principal office. And we only had one black teacher. His car was tarred. And we've been spit on and just a lot of stuff. But, you know, I hate to revisit, but it seems like in today's time it's still lingering.
Around what time was this in Nashville when you were in school and all this stuff was happening?
70s.
Yeah.
It was just yesterday. Just yesterday.
Mm-hmm. People don't realize, particularly with desegregation in various parts of the country, what that looked like. Because,
Right.
Growing up, going to middle school in the late 70s and early 80s, I think many of us in that area have stories to tell as well that would
Right.
be shocking to people.
So, my sister and I, we were walking to the library in the neighborhood one day, and I was looking around on the walls, and I saw Angela Davis, who is my shero, and Nikki Giovanni, to name a few.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw Angela Davis, I saw that afro. I said, I want to be like her. So that was the spark. And, the activism really came on strong when I was in college, because I came through, again, another era where we were out there marching in the streets. They didn't want my HBCU, which is Tennessee State University, to be classified as a black college. But we marched on, and hey, still today, that's all I know.
So as we look where we are as a country now, and as we look at what those of us in Georgia are still really battling with in terms of the race and the campaign for the governor in the state of Georgia here, certainly with Stacey Abrams' campaign just being such an incredible opportunity for us to see the ways in which we're still having to fight. And
Right.
still having to challenge and change the system because of the way that things are. How have you, over the years, seen your activism change and grow?
Well, it has grown or evolved through the media, social life on Facebook, Instagram, because it allows people from all over the world to engage, have a voice, get educated about issues. And presently, in stating about Stacey Abrams running for governor, I feel like she's a brilliant woman, and she is using the legal system to help fight the battle. And I've seen her players, as I would say, there are of every shade, color. Seems like every background you could think of, and that's a beautiful thing to me. So whatever is written in the books, I don't know it all. I just feel like Stacey is brilliant enough to be that voice, or she was born for her position to move things forward.
I clearly think she was born for this time. I think your piece about the whole social media is very important, because that's the way in which we're seeing more people get out and talk about the stories.
Right.
And
I would like to be a part of a panel discussion of different races of women in particular, to talk about some of these issues, to really get to the core of it, and to see, what their thoughts are and what do they suggest. I really get tired of the woman of color having to be the fighter for this and the fighter for that. I want to hear their voices. See how we can all fuse together, because again, when I reflect back on high school days, we were being bused to those schools. Later on, we were on the same basketball team, same cheerleading team, volleyball, you name it.
who shows up in your life as the person or the people who've made it possible for you to be who you are today?
Well, after my mother transitioned in 2010, I had two soul sisters, two angel soul sisters to show up in my life to lean on, because I was broken. And one of them, her name is Charlene Edwards. She's my sorority sister. And then there's Betty Castilia. And so those two women were my sisters. Without them, I wouldn't have I would just be totally broken because I had to learn how to crawl again after my mother transition. It was like the little girl in me, she was torn.
So as we have spent some time with you talking about all the different ways you show up in the world and the different work you do, what are some things you want our listeners to take away from our conversation today?
I would like for people to listen to my 7 P's of life, my 7 P's personally. And I'll just kind of go down the list and describe it as briefly as I can.
Okay.
The first one would be to pray. Pray, 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 pray. And then knowing that you have the power to dream. Also be passionate about it, okay? Plan. Have a blueprint to follow, through your journey of life. Just write down your thoughts. Okay, this is a huge one. Think positive, even if there's the negative energy around. And the haters. Make the haters your motivator. Have patience. Like I said, being a visual artist or a barber or any type of artist, a lot of people don't have the stamina or, just that gift to hang in there. But you can do it if you stick with it. Have purpose. Just don't be just doing a painting. Let the painting or the haircut or the music or the poem tell a story. It will inspire someone to motivate them in their life, even if it's a smile. And of course, profit, got to get them coins, make that money.
Well, I think that those are certainly 7 P's that people want to keep in their pocket.
All right.
Hey. Because we need something to pull out every now and then to keep us on a positive vibe. So I love that.
Okay.
And I love you for sharing your story with us today and the way in which you show up in the world.
Okay.
I know there are going to be some sisters who will want to contact you to talk more about your work and to talk about your fabulous haircuts. And so how would they best contact you?
My number, you can call me at 678-851-2947. If I don't answer, please leave a voicemail or text me, and I'll be sure to follow up.
Phyllis Robinson, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you today.
Same here to you.
And I appreciate your being part of our Black lesbian history.
Love it.
Phyllis Robinson and her 7 P's. I hope you wrote those down and will put them in your pocket so that you can bring them out when you need a bit of inspiration. Thank you, Phyllis, for sharing with us your story of how you made that leap from a corporate space to your artistic ventures. If you want more information about Phyllis or want to check her out for a haircut, be sure to check our show notes to this episode. As always, we so appreciate you listening to the podcast. If you'd like to listen to previous episodes, you can visit us on iTunes or at our website, ZammyNobla.com. And while you're on iTunes, why don't you subscribe, rate the podcast, and make sure that you are in tune with future episodes. You can also do that wherever you choose to listen to your podcast. Finally, thank you for being part of our listening audience. And until next time, have a sweet one. Sweet.